G'day, ZiggyD here, back today with another Path of Exile hardcore death analysis video. You guys really enjoyed the one I put out last week, and I really enjoyed doing it. It's nice to break these down, pretty much frame by frame, and see what we can learn from these very high level deaths, because when these people get into the level 90s or the high level 80s, they have to create characters and have builds and gear themselves up in a way that means they're not just dying all of the time, basically, to be able to survive. So those rare things that do end up killing them are great learning experiences for the rest of us, and probably for them as well. But before we jump into the analysis for this week's video, I just want to introduce who I'm going to be looking at, and that is Mangliwang. Now, he's a relatively unknown streamer. I just found his stream through this death video, actually. I hadn't seen it before now, but it looks pretty cool, And he was playing on a level 91 frenzy melee character, essentially, which you'll see when we start playing this video here. But before we jump into the analysis, let's actually go ahead and play this little death scene here.
Oh my god.
Oh, so brutal, so brutal. So as you can see, first impressions is pretty much a discharged death. He got discharged twice, it did a ton of damage, smashed him, killed him instantly. Now this guy is, he's got a pretty good amount of life for being in Onslaught League. This is no combs here, no combs. Hashtag yellow swag. 4,900 health without a combs heart. So very, very good on the health. Now, relying on high life has been, a pretty consistent way to avoid elemental ailments and to deal with elemental ailments. But from a really big hit like Discharge, even 5,000, even 8,000 life is not enough to avoid that straight up. So before we actually get into too much of the analysis, though, let's just go back to here and we'll check out these guys that he actually died to, because we really want to bring attention to these guys because they're extremely dangerous. So, the Undying Grapplers. These guys spawn in quite a few maps and also in Act 3, and you need to be very careful of them. Firstly, they flicker strike, so they're a bastard to deal with. But secondly, if you slay their nearby friends, so any other mobs around them, they gain power charges. Now, because they use Discharge, the more power charges they have, the more damage they're going to do to you. And when they actually have those power charges, they can use Discharge and do a ton of damage to you, as we see in this particular video here. So you need to be very careful about killing these guys. Either focus them down first, or if you're using an AoE skill and don't really have that option, then killing off their friends carefully and backing away from them, staying out of discharge range, because they don't have a bunch of increased AoE radius passives like we do when we make discharge builds for ourselves. But still, that area of effect there is incredibly dangerous, as is pretty evident. So we can actually jump over. First, we'll just rewatch the point of death one more time. So as you can see, 2 discharges takes him out. Now, because he's running Frenzy with a very high attack speed and blind on it as well, so if we actually go back, we can probably see him blinding some mobs. Actually, probably a little bit further back. Yeah, you can see the sparkles of blind appearing on the mobs there. So he's using blind on his main attack skill, which means that he doesn't really take any hits. He takes 1 hit right here, which brings him down from 33 and brings a little bit of life, but it regenerates back. So taking a very small amount of damage from those punches. So that's pretty much a non-issue here. We can pretty much rule that out as a cause of death, or even being related to the death. It's all about the discharges and the shock stacks and stuff here. So let's jump over to VLC now. We can do some frame-by-frame analysis. We're getting a little bit more advanced this week. Pretty exciting stuff. And right here, this particular frame we have is the exact point of hit for the first discharge. Now we can see from that first discharge, he takes 2,000 damage. Now, as I said, this is a huge amount of damage, and it applies a massive shock stack of 7 seconds right from the point of contact. That's avoiding, getting hit by any other form of damage for 7 whole seconds is pretty brutal. So this is the first. If nothing else, you've taken away being careful of these Undying Grapplers as a source of death for even really well geared and designed characters. The next thing is these shock stacks, finding a way to deal with these shock stacks. Now, as I said, with very high life, that can help you avoid some smaller shock stacks from things like sparks and things, but really high damage hits like that, you need a Dispel shock stack. A Dispel's Shocking Flask. Now, Mangliwang did in fact have one of these flasks. His #1 flask here, as he's mentioned in the Reddit thread where this was posted, is a Dispel's Shock Flask. So that would have gotten rid of that shock if he had to pop that now, in addition to healing him up as well. I believe it's also an insta-heal pot of some description as well. So that would have obviously helped out quite a bit. Now we can zoom forwards. Now hold on. So, although this is a huge shock stack, it's only one shock stack. That's also an important distinction to make. This means he's taking 40% extra damage from this guy. So let's go frame by frame now. Assuming 40% extra on 2000, he has, as we zoom forwards, we'll go frame by frame. You notice he regens up to, let's see if we can find the exact point here, 3,200. Careful, over 3,200, 3,300, 3,000, and that's right where the discharge goes off there. 3,345. So 40% extra on 2,000 isn't 3,000. My math isn't very good, but that's not that much. So that should be something like an extra 800, 2,800 damage. But as you can see, this shock stack instantly takes him down to 0. Very next frame is that death point there. Mangliwang, if you're watching this, I know how painful it can be to watch these sorts of things frame by frame slowed down. That's pretty brutal. Gangster Boo did mention last week that it was a bit heart-wrenching, a bit sickening to the stomach to watch this sort of breakdown. But know that this sort of thing is going towards educating other people and maybe entertaining them a little bit as well. So he takes a huge amount of damage, much more than the 40% extra from the shock stack would suggest. Now, the thing to know about lightning damage as a function of its, mechanics is that it has a huge damage range. So that although he takes 2,000 damage in the first hit, that's not a very reliable thing to gauge the actual damage taken from lightning damage. If we look at level 17 discharge here, per power charge, we're looking at 20 to 400, huge rate. Now, comparing this to fire, which is much more reliable, is 150 to 220, and even ice, which is very reliable as well, is 120 to 180. So that's a huge range, very high damage potential, but also very low damage potential. So the thing about shock damage is it's very spiky, and when you start combining in the shock stacks as well, you're going to get that spike damage being even more erratic. So you need to be super aware of how that can happen. You can take several shock hits, get those shock stacks, and you're getting hit by sparks, for example, and it's just taking little chunks of your life away, getting little chunks. You got your 3 shock stacks still in little chunks, but then you can suddenly get hit by one that's going to take the rest of your health away, or 2 in rapid succession that do a ton of damage both together. There's that RNG you need to be very careful of. So again, reinforcing the fact that dispels shock flasks and just being very careful of lightning damage in general, being aware of that erratic nature of it is pretty important. So there's not too many things to take from this other than, being very careful with these grapplers, having a dispel shock flask of some description on you for when you do get those shock stacks from those big hits, and just being careful of those things. But let's take a look at what he could have done to avoid this. Now, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to, say he could have avoided this. This is a very unlucky death, and it happened very, very quickly. So your reflexes have to be pretty spot on for this. So we'll go back to the point of death here, and we'll see exactly how long he has to react there. Alright, so we see it looks very quick, and if we go into VLC even and break it down frame by frame, we can actually see from the first time he gets shock stack and realizes, holy shit, I just took a ton of damage. We're at 17 seconds to the point of death is about under 1 second, really. He's 17 point something down to under 1 second time to react there. So I think the best way to deal with this is to have your Dispelled Shock on one of your instant heal pots so that he could have instantly healed. This is probably the only thing he could have done. He probably could have tried to back away from it after the first hit, but I don't think that would have been very reliable. Reactions would have to be super spot on for that, and it's not as quick as simply using that flask. So if you had as soon as taking that first shock stack, training your mind, training your muscle memory when you see a big explosion like that to react with using that flask. And he's admitted this is exactly what he should have done. Just simply an error, simply a you know, not being able to react in time. But popping that flask there would have dispelled the shock stack and would have healed him up enough to take that second hit, even with additional spike damage. Probably would have taken between 2 and 3k, but still would have had enough life to survive that. And that probably would have been all the power charges dispelled as well, and there probably wouldn't have been any more discharges after that. So very unlucky, very brutal death. A few little things we can take from it, but interesting nonetheless. Again, highlights just one of the things, one of the many things in Path of Exile that can end up taking out a really good character. So anyway, go check out Mangliwang's stream, or go check out his this actual link to this full video, including how his character plays, so you guys can check that out as well. And you know, go check it out. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.
Oh my god.